have a public-private partnership series event, we talk about how P3 can really work with the community to make things better. How can the public sector come together with private sectors and nonprofit agencies in order to improve things as a whole? So today we're going to find out more about how housing and infrastructure can come together with P3 to help the community. Some words of housekeeping. This event is hosted by Sunstone Cities. If you haven't heard about Sunstone Cities, that is the public sector arm of Sunstone, and we work very closely with government and nonprofit agencies in order to develop economic and growth solutions. And so if you are from the government or if you are from an agency and you're looking for staff augmentation, consulting, or other financing solutions, feel free to reach out to any of us here at Sunstone and we can definitely give you an answer or make a connection. And then of course we have multiple events coming up. The next one will be on February 27th. And so this one will be featuring Dustin McDonald from GoBiz. The exciting thing about the next P3 event is usually we have some sort of fireside chat or a panel, but the next one with GoBiz will be a business strategy session. So if you are a business owner or you know someone who owns a business, that will be a great opportunity to ask one-on-one your personal questions about improving your startup or developing economic growth plans. And of course, feel free to scan any of these QR codes, follow us on social media, check us out, and sign up for all the good things happening your way. Without further ado, allow me to introduce Jeff and Tiffany for our feature presentation. Let's give them a warm round of applause.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here today to be able to talk a little bit about the City of Glendora and what is going on in the community of Glendora from a economic development, long-range planning perspective with the city. For those of you, we are located in the eastern end of Los Angeles County, right where the 210 and 57 freeways meet. If you're familiar with that part of LA County, about 20 miles east of Pasadena along the 210. Fun fact about Glendora, before I get started about what's going on now, is that back in the 70s and late 60s, I think, the Clokey Studios, which produced Gumby, as well as the Davy and Goliath series, were located in the city of Glendora. So for those of you who were watched those as kids, maybe it's more of my generation than those about my age, but it was sort of fun fact about the city. But we're a suburban community of about 50,000 people. We're totally built out, primarily the great building period of Glendora as a residential community occurred between 1950 and about 1980. Nowadays, we're mostly an infill development community, like many, even in Orange County now. What the city operates on, I want to talk about, is back in late '24, the City Council, with its 2-year budget, establishes a strategic 2-year plan. So I'll talk a little bit about what that includes. I'll talk a little bit about what the major development activity going on in Glendora is right now. Talk a little bit about the Economic Action Plan, which is as part of the Sunstone project through the USC students, inform some of the outcomes and programs that we're implementing as part of that program. And I'll talk a little bit about affordable housing. We're working on an affordable housing project right now. First thing, the 25 to 27 City Council strategic plan. The council meets every 2 years and they establish primary goals and tasks that they give staff to achieve over a 2-year period. We have a 2-year budget, so we're of the philosophy that it doesn't happen unless it's funded. So these are programs that the council, not only from a policy perspective, wants to get behind, but also puts budget behind it if it's required. These are the 4 goals: suburban living, Glendora as a destination, which is the marketing program, new and revitalized facilities, and sustainable infrastructure, staff, and technology. So for what I'm talking about today, I didn't introduce myself correctly. I am the Community Development Director when I first started talking. So my department oversees things like, permitting, land use planning, engineering land development, housing and economic development. So I'm going to talk about the things that are covered in the suburban living section of the of the strategic plan. And there's a few things where we are working on in the Glendora as a destination plan. I will say that kind of the big things that have been happening in the city are, if you're familiar with LA County Metro, which is the transportation agency for Los Angeles County, they recently completed the phase 2B of the A line, which starts in downtown actually it goes even all the way down to Long Beach, hits downtown Los Angeles, goes all the way out to Pomona right now, which is 2 or 3 stops away from where Glendora is. So that light rail station stop just opened. So a lot of or some of the development at least, is being incentivized or at least facilitated by that happening. Development activity. This is a visual of Glendora, sort of from I guess that's the southwest. So you can see the beautiful Mount Baldy in the background, that we are a foothill community along the 210 corridor. Current projects, we have, because we're mostly a residential community, we are mostly the kind of development activity that happens in Glendora is primarily residential. The type of development we most commonly see in Glendora is what I call the tri-level townhome. It's a very familiar development product where you have parking at the first level and then 2 levels of living above it. There's usually 6 to 8 units in a single building. And that is the most common type of development. We have a lot of development activity right now, more I think I've seen in my entire time at the city, at least at one time. And I've been with the city about 18 years. So there's about 118 units under construction, which is a lot for Glendora as an infill community. 175 units or so in plan review, and another 194, almost 200, that are probably in the entitlement phase. So some of the common developers we see in our area are the Olson. They're all based out of Orange County. All developers come from Orange County, it seems like. So we have the Olson Company, Warmington, Malia Homes. Who else is
Brandywine?
Brandywine. They just had a grand opening on a project this week. So also Taylor Morrison is active building a project in the city. So quite a few for purchase type builders, and either attached or detached condominium or small lot subdivisions that we're seeing. The next thing I want to talk about is sort of long-range planning a little bit. The city is operating under a general plan that is about 20 or so years old, 25 years old. It's actually called Community Plan 2025. So we're just 1 year past 2025, and we are starting the process to do major updates to the land use element, circulation element of our general plan, along with the other mandatory elements of the housing element. Of course, we just completed a couple of years ago. But that will be a community-wide effort with lots of outreach. This is something that the council really wanted to do at this time, particularly because of the Gold Line coming. A lot of their major efforts on redevelopment or getting development is along our major east-west corridors in the community, which are Route 66 and Arrow Highway corridors. In addition, like many cities throughout the region, particularly in LA County, as those communities incorporated, they left little pockets of unincorporated sections. And so we are in the process of looking at annexing some of those remaining islands in the city, which this is a slide of this is a map of Glendora, but there are just a handful of little areas that we need to incorporate to make that all part of Glendora. The Economic Action Plan. So let me talk a little bit about that, because that's been a primary or major goal of the City Council for the last several years. Of course, they like to see the housing development, but they also want to see, which is very hard for us, jobs creating type of businesses. They also want to see better restaurants and places to shop. Everybody wants that favorite grocer, which shall not be named, right? And better places too, better steakhouses and things like that is what they want. So we have developed a multi-phase economic action plan, which we were in the process of developing. Actually, we've had the action plan originally since around 2012. It kind of didn't get updated for a while, and then we came back and started getting more active in it. And that was in developing and updating, and that was when we participated in the Sunstone Challenge last year. Phase 1 for us is to, of course, have a shop local program, and we have a couple of programs that incentivize business people to shop local. The Blue Dot, is that that's what it's called? Blue Dot, which is a purchase app where if you use the app when you're purchasing, you get credit that you can then apply and use at other stores in the city. And that's been pretty successful over the last year. We're also trying to do targeted incentives for the types of businesses that we want, particularly restaurants. We're in the process of developing a restaurant incentive program, much like the city of Eastville had done in the past. Their program seems to have been pretty effective. Eastville is a city out just east of us along the, I guess that's the 15 corridor going down to San Diego. Affordable housing. Let me shift gears again to affordable housing. So as part of the housing elements and as part of what cities do, we are in the affordable housing business. Housing in California has been deemed a crisis, and there is not enough production of housing going on, and what is being produced tends to be at the higher end of the market, and so it's not providing housing that serves all of the needs of the community, regardless wherever you are in the income strata. And so that means a lot of times what happens is municipalities, counties get involved in the development of affordable housing where either the rents or the purchase price is restricted based on income and household size. And we're doing the same thing. The City of Glendora, let's see if I'm going to go too far here. Yeah, the City of Glendora a couple of years ago purchased a little over a 2-acre size lot in the city. And we are currently working with Mercy Housing, which is one of the larger affordable housing developers who are active in Southern California, to build a 75-unit, 2 to 3 story apartment project targeted at low-income households, as well as permanent supportive housing. A percentage of it, about 25% of the units, will be for households that were previously homeless or are potentially at risk of being homeless, so the extremely low income end of the strata. And so this is located near the Grand and Arrow Highway section of the city. It was formerly actually a assisted living facility that had the state was no longer going to license it, so it had to close down, and the property owners sold it. And I think that is it. That's my presentation for today. I knew I had 10 minutes, so I went through everything really quickly. I covered a lot of ground with this presentation, so I'm very interested to be part of the panel and answer the questions that you might have. Both Tiffany and I'll be here for that too.
So, a lot of stuff to cover, right? One, I feel like we didn't give enough background to the Sunstone Economic Development Challenge at USC Price that Glendora is a part of. Do you want to speak to that a little bit? Give a little bit of background?
Sure. So this, last, I guess, maybe it was around late 24. We were contacted by the Sunstone group, and at that time we were really starting to work a little bit more earnestly on the economic action plan. And so at that point, there were a group of students. I think there was an interview process. We actually interviewed several groups of students, and then there was a group selected to work with us on the project to really, I think we asked them to look at what we were developing. We already had a general framework of the economic action plan, and along with that, we also were starting to develop a station area plan, which was also later adopted in last year. And so we wanted them to provide their own perspective and look on what we were doing, and we sort of guided them to actually develop a sort of a standalone project on their own. And so what they came up with was I think they called it the golden thread plan, which was basically linking the station area plan from a land development perspective and transportation perspective with our major east-west corridor, which is Route 66, as well as going down to what we call the marketplace, which is where our sort of big box retailers and car dealerships are. And I think they were actually their project was, I think, runner-up or second place in the competition. So they did really well, and it was a pleasure to work with those students.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing. So yeah, Sunstone works really closely with various educational institutions as part of our public-private partnership system. And so USC, of course, raise your hand if you're a Trojan. All of you, I know like 50% of you here are Trojans. They have some of the best policy programs out there. So we see a lot of future leaders, and we definitely, want to see how we can grow those economic development units with cities like Glendora, for example. All right, so you guys talked about, or Jeff, you talked about community and infrastructure. Do you guys want to get into some public-private partnerships and how that can kind of boost housing or infrastructure development?
You want to?
You wanna-
Either of you. Both of you.
Both of us. Well, I'll give
Okay.
Tiffany a chance to talk.
All right. So in terms of public-private partnerships, what we do a lot, especially on the economic development side, is we are constantly working with the real estate industry and the real estate professionals, brokers, property owners, because from our perspective, from a city's perspective, we are the regulators in a sense. We are the one with the zoning codes, the building codes. We need to make sure that buildings are safe, but at the same time, in order to institute change in economic development, we have to be in partnership with our brokers and our real estate industry. So we're attending the ICSC events, that's the retail conferences, but then we're also at the local real estate events just to make sure that our people know, one, where Glendora is, and two, that the real estate industry understands that there is still opportunity in Glendora, even though we are completely built out.
Okay, so Sunstone is headquartered in Irvine, and we're not right next to Glendora, but we're like kind of close-ish in SoCal. As far as housing goes, so why should we as a community care? Or like, what can we do or ask our local government in order to make infrastructure and housing more affordable or make P3 infrastructure happen? Either one.
Yeah, I guess, housing is one of those things that's sort of, I think there's lots of people who have different ideas about housing, and housing is very controversial in general. Throughout my entire career, it's interesting where commercial development, at least where I've worked in the San Gabriel Valley, I've worked for 4 different San Gabriel Valley cities. And historically, commercial development is much less controversial than housing development. So even though there's a big demand for housing in our area of Southern California, and I think that's true everywhere, it generally meets a lot of resistance from, or historically has met a fair amount of resistance from not only the residents, but local government itself. And in recent years, I think the state has recognized that and has actually adopted a series of laws that are intended to facilitate housing development. And some of them have worked okay. Some of them have not really had much of an impact, at least on Glendora at all. I think that I wish it was different. I don't know what to, I can tell you that there's a lot of demand for housing in the market, and I think now cities are finally, at least in the San Gabriel Valley, are finally breaking out of, it was basically all planning departments in the San Gabriel Valley for decades, in years, were all about protecting the integrity of the single family neighborhood. And any type of development that did not fit into that model was, basically it was hard to get anything approved from a city, and cities would create a lot of friction, and there'd be a lot of friction from the residents and so forth. So I think now that's finally changing. I think cities now, we're not seeing the kind of population growth that we had historically seen. Our schools are declining in enrollment to the point where they're closing, and actually several of the sites that I'm working on in the city right now are former school sites. And so I think now cities are finally waking up and seeing housing as a tool for economic development. From where I sit, I see California is probably going to be sitting in a period of relatively stagnant growth for the next several decades to come. So cities should be looking at ways to fight for that population if they want to remain economically viable going into the future.
Speaking of economically viable futures, you guys mentioned Blue Dot earlier. So, full disclosure, Blue Dot is a Sunstone portfolio company. And what Blue Dot does, like Jeff mentioned, is, why don't you share with them what Blue Dot does and how that can help economic vitality?
Sure. So what Blue Dot is, it's an app. So it's an app for the consumer to use to get rewards back. And so what the city has done is the city has funded about $10,000 that goes into the app where if you shop in Glendora, you can submit your receipt and get a 5% rebate. So if you think about it, it's kind of like a credit card with all the points you can get. It's the same concept, but we can control that message a little bit more. And actually, we have flexibility with Blue Dot to not just say you get 5% back on shopping at your local Walmart. What we do is we do actually targeted incentivized shopping for example, businesses in our village, our downtown, or even local restaurants. So it's a way for us to help encourage people to shop local. It's not necessarily geared towards somebody who lives there. It's really anybody who shops in Glendora can use this app. And we're targeting the residents, people who work there, students who go to school at Citrus College or local community college. So it was really a way to help us encourage more of a shop local program. I mean, there's other ways to do it, but we felt like going down the path of using an app which engages with the community can help make the fun out of shopping local.
I love shopping local. There are so many small business owners to support. There's so many innovative designers and creative and people just kind of building things. And if they're in my community and I get cash back, then great. My bank account also loves that. So for other small business owners or entrepreneurs, what can they do either working with P3 or working with their local government to kind of get tapped into that whole startup development and economic growth?
I think partially it's for a small business owner, you have to connect with your business community. If you think about it, yes, a city is very heavily invested in their residents, right? We're all about providing, where you live, a place to go to the park, making sure your streets are smooth and you've got great public services. But for a business community, it's important to stay engaged with not only your neighbors, but also with your Chamber of Commerce and your downtown associations to really get involved. Yes, businesses are stretched thin, but if there's ways where you can collaborate with your neighboring business owners to do some marketing pieces or things like that, it's almost like the strength in numbers appears where you're not the only one doing it on your own. So, and then of course, connecting with your local economic development team is also a great way to stay connected. And from there, my role as the economic development manager for Glendora is really to provide resources. Where are the ones who want to give businesses a lead to somewhere else? Because once again, we're a government and we can only do so much, but within our network, with our partnerships, we can do a lot of great things.
Okay, and I want to make sure that we leave enough time for Q&A for the folks here. So if there was one piece of advice from each of you when it comes to building trust with the community, building trust for the future, what would you say for the folks here?
You can go first.
I think that you have to be, you need to, as a local government, you need to be transparent as transparent with the community and open with, as the leaders of the community, the city council, the planning commission, those appointed individuals need to be clear as possible and transparent with the community about what their vision is for the community. Why did they want to run and get elected and be leaders in the community? And as staff, I think you need to wholeheartedly, support that vision. And I think you need to craft a message that's both transparent and it's also not so complicated with, bureaucratic language and legal jargon in a way that your average, resident and can understand and understand what your situation is. So I guess it's all about good communication.
I would say you need to think about the community first. So I would say back in the day, kind of old school government was all about creating processes were easier for staff to implement, but now it's reversed where you got to think about the community and then you think about the organization, then you think about you as a staff person. So when you're out there with the community, it's really everything that you do is to create a better environment for all of them. So think about the community as the priority.
I love it. Transparency, communication, community. Got it.
Yes.
Those are 3 words for 2026. All right, let's open up the floor to Q&A. If you have any questions for these amazing individuals, have at it.
What's the population of Glendora now, and are you going up or down?
We've been hovering at around 50,000 people for the last 25 years or so. During the pandemic, we did go down in population by several hundred residents. And I think the latest numbers out of the State Department of Finance is that we're roughly back at that where we were before the pandemic.
I saw another hand.
If I understood correctly, you said within your department, you have both business attraction and regulation, so the permitting. Does that create any tension or conflict within the structure? Because one's trying to say, oh, the permitting process is very easy and straightforward. The other's saying we've got to meet these mandates and it takes the time it takes.
We get along.
Yeah, we get along fine. Yeah, no. So I guess I've done both sides of that in my career. I think I started out working for redevelopment agencies at the beginning of my career. For those of you who are around and remember those, and then I sort of gravitated over to planning and the permitting side of it as redevelopment started to go away. I know exactly what you're talking about, that sort of tension. I think that, at least in our case, I think the economic development staff and the regulatory staff work both in close proximity and work together. I think a lot of times it's the conventional wisdom to put economic development as part of a city manager's office, which in my experience exacerbates and makes that tension worse, because then you're sort of, it's the community development or regulatory against the folks in the city manager's office, and they're always telling us what we to do, and they make commitments, and they know we can't keep those commitments because we have these sets of regulations to deal with. So I think having both staffs from the different disciplines working in close proximity and hand in hand with each other, they have a better understanding of what their goals are for each of the divisions. And because we do have that shared vision with the council strategic goal, it's readily apparent, for everybody. So Tiffany's staff is working and will contribute to things like the general plan, as well as the planning staff contributing to things and helping through the restaurant assistance program and other economic development programs and housing programs. So we'd like to have some of those staff at the table when we're talking about those things as well. So.
Yeah, I guess this is my fourth city doing economic development, and so I've always been in community development for the standpoint of, from my perspective, you want to be with the regulators in terms of educating them on what economic development means. And I do have to say, in the past 10 years, the notion of economic development has risen up to be a priority in most cities. So from a regulatory standpoint, from a planning standpoint, planners are getting more comfortable with having economic development in the room.
Question in the front. Matthew will throw a catchbox mic at you. Or
One-
two.
Okay. Hi. So I think City of Glendora's largest employer would be the Citrus College as well as the Unified School District. So it really emphasized that City of Glendora is a city that heavily relies on residential and real estate. So in terms of the culture of Glendora, I think the city lies within the 30-mile zone, which is like for Beverly Hills up to Glendora would be all about like TVs and like studio and everything, as you mentioned. But in terms of economic development, is there a trend of like getting the sort of the trends of like TV's entertainment back to Glendora for the economic development arm? And do you see a lot of, for example, a lot of employees of these within the 30-mile zone lives in Glendora who wants to maybe work closer to home? Anything that, have any future plans on that as well?
I think from a jobs perspective, we're starting to get more focused on actually like workforce development of our residents. I don't necessarily think we see kind of an impact that the entertainment industry has on our community just because of our proximity. I think where we see our workforce go is really more the kind of the corporate, the blue collar type work where they're either commuting down to Pasadena or actually down into Orange County or east into the Inland Empire. So that's the type of workforce that we tend to see more of, not necessarily the entertainment industry, but we are starting to dip a little bit more into the workforce development side where we're trying to partner more with Citrus College, Cal Poly Pomona, and really focus on how do we make sure that our residents have the job skills that they need to continue to be successful in their careers.
Time for another question?
I'm actually, although not a Trojan now, I'm an alumni of Azusa Pacific University, so I'm very familiar with Glendora. I'm just kind of curious of what your university partnerships with is. I know Azusa is obviously an Azusa, but it's truly on that border with Citrus College and Azusa. And all my friends lived in Glendora when we were in college, and so I just want to understand if you guys have a university partnership in your economic action plan.
We don't have a university partnership, but we are having the conversation. So for example, with Citrus College, just engaging with their government affairs person to make sure that not just the students know, but all the staff there are aware of what's going on in Glendora. And the Blue Dot Open Rewards program is actually a great example of encouraging them to use that program. As I said, it's not just the residents, it's the greater community that helps support our businesses. So we're working on things like that, but just visibility, like Citrus College comes to our goes to the chamber events and they're active throughout the community. So that's really the biggest piece that we're focusing on right now with universities.
And with Blue Dot, in regards to Blue Dot, that was actually one of the recommendations Team Santa Clarita proposed for last year at the Economic Development Challenge. Are you guys able to track your local businesses through it as well, outside of the shop local program?
We do a little bit of tracking. I think particularly with the small businesses, we track based upon the conversations we're having with them. So we have a program called Mobile City Hall where we're out in the community meeting one-on-one with these small businesses to understand what their needs are, what their concerns are, because yes, we are trying to be a little bit more in the KPI performance indicator place, but then at the same time, it's that face-to-face interaction that helps us guide our work and lead the conversations we have with the greater business community.
All right. Oh, so many. Have at it.
Thanks. So regarding housing and affordability, obviously Ezra Klein, somebody on the left who stepped out of his shadow and said, here's the issue, which was really helpful. I live in Newport Beach, and I was recently at a meeting the last year where the members of the city council were talking, and they said, everybody's just fighting tooth and nail any new developments are going to go in. They're trying to prohibit anything new. I think 4,000 home units have been approved, but likely, who knows when it'll go. It might take 15 years. Lawsuits, everything else will prohibit things from happening. I know other people that are developers, multifamily developers, and they just said the regs are just so burdensome. What they've got to do, we got to have a little green strip there, we got to send people here, we got to do this over here. It just drives the cost up really high. That's what Ezra Klein is talking about in abundance, right? Is the regulatory burden, and let alone just not even including the losses. People just don't want it. So more traffic and more people living around it. So what is it that you're doing in your area, Glendora, and if you can name like 2 or 3 things that are actually going to reduce the regulatory burden for developers and also facilitate them putting in something in a more timely manner? What's actually on the table right now to be done, and how long is it going to take just to get those initial things done to help us attack affordability?
Sure. So I think so. It usually starts with many of the regulations that tend to be burdensome and create the most friction from the get-go are planning regulations, right? And I think, like I touched on, most every city in Southern California, and not to pick on Newport Beach, but I will bet that Newport Beach has a ton of property maintenance regulations that are there. Like you said, the blades of grass have to be this high. There has to be this percentage of this, and so those regulations, in my view, are largely there. They are sort of like planning departments at some point in time became viewed as, you are not planners, you are the HOA for the community. And you're there to enforce, and planners used to carry around the zoning codes with them, and they had all these notes with them, and they were there when they met with anybody, a developer, to basically tell you all the reasons why it couldn't be built. And then it would start this lengthy process that would go through a design review committee that you'd have to go back through 2 or 3 times, and then finally the planning commission. If you got it. So I think in Glendora what we've done, and I think we're the first city in California to do this, the state required that you adopt objective design guidelines, meaning guidelines that require no personal opinion on what they mean, right? It used to be you'd have to go to the planning counter, and I got to meet with the guy at the counter, then I got to meet with the director, et cetera. So we don't have that anymore. We also don't have a design review committee or architectural review committee in the city of Glendora. And I'll talk a little bit about a lot of things that used to require planning commission review or CUPs. We eliminated that actually through the last housing element. We committed to removing a lot of those things. From a structural perspective, we've also moved engineering land development into a development. So oftentimes engineering is completely separate in public works. We now have building, planning, and engineering all under my management in order to streamline the process as much as possible. It's still a struggle for the regulatory staff because it's a very complex set of rules that we have to navigate with multiple disciplines, but hopefully we're doing some things to make it to facilitate development and economic development in the city.
Great answer. All right. It looks like we are out of time, so let's give a huge round of applause for these amazing folks. Thank you so much, Jeff. Thank you so much, Tiffany. We have, you guys can hang out here. We'll just take a second. So a few closing announcements. If you found today's event interesting, informative, educational, we do have more P3 events coming up. Like I mentioned earlier, if you are a small business owner or you know a founder or fellow entrepreneur, then swing by on February 27th. We will have a sort of session where you can ask all the questions. It's just an hour-long Q&A. So if you want all the resources, this is your time to get all your questions answered. And then we also have our annual charitable 5K coming back. It is on May 9th. If you scan this or pick up any of the postcards scattered around this room, you will be able to get a ticket. If you want a discount code for these charity runs, find me, I can get you a code. And feel free to stay, network, chat among yourselves. We have coffee and snacks coming in just a little bit, but right after this, we have our weekly Sunstone Stage Connects event. And this week, we have some clean tech startups from Lacey, and they will be talking all about the future of clean tech and innovation. It'll be really exciting, and again, there will be snacks. All right, thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful Friday.